Here are 5 mistakes every employee handbook makes and how to avoid them. Did you know 60% of staff avoid reading their employee handbook altogether? That's a pretty big number, considering it's probably one of the most important things they'll need to read throughout the onboarding process. There is a sad truth that many employers make common mistakes when creating their employee handbooks, mistakes that are actually pretty easy to avoid. Mistake number 1: text, text, and more text. Teams tend to forget about the rules of engagement and send out a plain text document, often in the hundreds of pages, thinking that their employees will read it. Simply put, this is a huge oversight. As with most internal communications, you have to make them enticing and captivating to ensure your employees actually read them. To avoid this mistake, break your text down by using headers, extra paragraphs, bullet points, and numbered lists. We also recommend adding images and videos to dismantle your wall of text and further support what you're trying to say. Mistake number 2: creating a huge handbook for everyone to read. Too many companies create one giant employee handbook with multiple policies and procedures included. This means your employees end up trawling through a huge file, reading information that oftentimes isn't even that relevant to them. The result: they give up halfway through because they assume most of the document doesn't apply to them and their role. To avoid this common mistake, break your handbook down by department or position. Pick out the policies and procedures which apply to certain roles and include them in a separate handbook. Create multiple handbooks if you must. Mistake number 3: not updating your employee handbook regularly. This mistake sounds pretty obvious, but it happens a surprising amount. In fact, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that only about 1 in 4 small businesses have an up-to-date handbook. This is usually because it's something which is often signed on the first day, then hidden away and largely forgotten about. This means you're left with a document that is filled with out-of-date policies and procedures. To avoid this mistake, simply set a date in your company calendar to go through the employee handbook and update anything which is out of date. You could also consider moving your employee handbook online to a platform like AirMason, where you can easily make edits and changes. Having an online handbook also makes it easier for your employees to read, as they can access it from their mobile, tablet, or desktop device, wherever they are. Mistake number 4: too much legalese in your employee handbook. There's very little point in asking your employees to read through your handbook if they can't understand what half of it is saying. They are qualified to do a job in your company, not professionally trained to read through legal jargon, apart from the legal team, of course. A large number of companies take policies and procedures directly from their attorneys and paste them straight into their handbooks. This leaves little time to think about how it reads, the tone of voice versus your brand and how you want to come across, or simply how easy it is to understand. All of the above can prove to be pretty big mistakes. To avoid this common pitfall, try rewriting your policies and procedures to plain, simple, relatable language. Make them easier to understand and more in line with your company's tone of voice. Pull out the key points of what the policy or procedure is trying to say, and now condense the information down into a much easier to read description, and let the employee know where they can find the expanded or full version elsewhere. This way, they can reference it when they need it, but aren't forced to struggle through a lengthy, unpalatable book of policies. Mistake number 5: it's just too boring. A massive mistake that employers make is sending something out which is just plain boring. Their handbook is pages of black and white text, corporate stuffy language with no visuals. It's totally unenjoyable to read and even more unenjoyable to look at. Your employee handbook should be made with the same level of marketing expertise that you use for your company website. It needs to be carefully designed to ensure it is as engaging as it can possibly be. When creating your employee handbook, it's vital you think about design. How do you want it laid out? What will the front page look like? What colors and font will you use? Does it fit with your brand guidelines? Is it eye-catching and engaging from the very first page? Imagery. Which images and videos best support what you are trying to say? Where should you place them for maximum impact? Language. What is your company tone of voice? How do you communicate with staff? Should the tone be friendly, professional, warm, humorous? Story. What story are you trying to tell? Does your handbook follow a consistent theme the whole way through? Do the sections logically link together? The mistakes we've outlined may sound obvious, but we see them time and time again. If you need help enhancing your handbook, get in touch with one of our experts who'll be happy to offer guidance and advice at www.airmason.com.